Hello, everybody, and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today, we say hello to Christoph Berentzen of Commerzbank. Hey, Christoph, how are you doing?
Fine, thanks. And you?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining. It's really nice to have you on the show. Your official title at Commerzbank and what we want to talk about today is about API governance. And your official title doesn't say governance, it says your cluster lead API banking. What does that mean? Like, it's a little bit of a funny term, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cluster lead is at Commerzbank what you might know as tribe lead in an agile organization, which means that I'm end-to-end responsible for my topic. And while for other cluster leads, it's a product like consumer loans. In my case, it's the API infrastructure. And in my role, I'm responsible not only for the technology itself, but as well for enabling all the other organization units in order to make use of API for technical reasons or for business reasons.
And I think that's why you're here, because that's really the interesting part, right? Not just enabling APIs technically, but also making sure that people use them, that they use them right, and that the organization takes advantage of the opportunities of APIs. Now, can you talk a little bit about the history of APIs at Commerzbank, how Commerzbank realized that APIs are important, how that relates maybe to open banking, and where you see yourself there in that vision and the role that you have?
Yeah, sure. To be honest, I joined Commerzbank at 2018, so the start was a little bit before. So 1 year ahead, there was a decision from the senior management to build up several departments for new technologies like CI/CD, cloud, and API, and decided to invest into those modern technologies in order to make use of them, of course, for especially internal reasons. And in the API cluster, as I joined, we gave ourselves a new vision, and the vision was to make Commerzbank leading provider of banking APIs in Germany. And with that vision, the business focus was set a little bit, even though our focus was lying on internal efficiencies first, because we believe that you have to free up your internal systems with API and to provide the data via RESTful APIs before go outside with them. I think Amazon did something similar as well. And I see that this is really working out. So we see a really drastically raise of internal APIs and usage of them, as well. Reuse is quite important to us. I mean, that's for the efficiency reasons. And we see that the time to market is going to be shorter and shorter because the APIs are already there and you can take them like little pieces that are already existing.
So you have a good story there, I would say, with beginning with APIs for internal kind of optimization or efficiencies, and then widening up to also include external APIs so that you can do API related cooperations with companies and customers. That also means, I think, that you have more and more APIs and that you maybe have to manage them differently. And I think this is where governance really comes into play. So
absolutely.
Were you really like just focusing on governance from the very beginning, or was that something where over time you realized that, APIs are really starting to be useful, but now we have to be a little bit more careful how we manage them? How did that play out?
I mean, in the API cluster, we try to not overthink processes, and we try to not really design everything first before starting. So, but during our journey, we saw upcoming problems. For example, we had new API versions, and the older one with wrong patterns, for example, were still in use. So there was just a need for governance, or the support requests just got more and more, and I had to make sure that we don't end up as a support cluster. And I mean that is, I would say, half a year in advance, we are taking care of these issues before they are really hitting us. And so in that case, currently, I mean, we are bringing out more and more external functionality and are working on a lot of external APIs. So with this in mind, we know that we need most definitely an automated onboarding process, and we need reporting. We need a billing engine for business as a API as a service, and so on and so forth. And I think that's the way you can take care best of those topics, to see them when they are upcoming and they are not yet a problem. But you see they will be a problem in half a year from now or in a year from now. And that's not my primary focus. I mean, the primary focus was, of course, on delivering functionality and make sure that our platform is really robust and resilient in order to avoid any outages. And we do everything for working on the API security and on the resilience of our platform. But on the other hand, we now see that we have to change from delivering functionality to more taking care of focus and future development of APIs and the technology.
That part I find really fascinating. And on the one hand, right, you're saying, yes, we need to make sure that our platform is robust, resilient, secure, all of this. Of course, this is kind of necessary. It wouldn't work without that. But then what you're also saying, I think, is that, well, it doesn't really matter that much if our platform is great if we don't have any APIs that are using it. So what I liked was really the story when we talked a little bit in advance, was the story that you were telling, how you actually make sure that the different business units that are supposed to provide APIs, how you make sure that you enable them, right? That they actually start using the platform. So what's your pattern there? Because I think that is very interesting, because we see so many large organizations where this specific problem is really a limiting factor, right? Like they build good API infrastructure, but people are kind of hesitant to start really taking the plunge into the API world. So how are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, when you want to enable an organization with API technology, I mean, API is nothing new to a bank, really. We've done it 40 years ago as well, but the way we are providing APIs now, which means we are trying to design RESTful interfaces that are reusable and easy to understand, is quite different. And we have to point out all the opportunities that come with this design principles, and we have to bring it to the older guys or to the business units that have never made use of them, and that are really hard discussions internally to say, well, I know that you've used this field description, for example, for 10 years now or for 20 years now, and it's established internally, but we have to come to a point where it's easy to understand, so easy that even an 18-year-old developer from Singapore can understand what the API is doing, in order to be future-proof for when we want to bring out this functionality somewhere. We don't know for what currently, but we should be able to bring every functionality out there. And that is something we invested a lot in. We have a team for decentral enablement, and are providing trainings for business experts, for developers, for operation engineers, and as well for cluster leads. I mean, that is something for other cluster leads. They have to understand why their APIs should be reusable and what advantages come with this. I mean, when I have, for example, the old API one-to-one, point-to-point interfaces, I have, for example, 50 web services which are doing similar services. And when I summarize this with APIs, I end up with 3, and can then reduce my maintenance dramatically. I mean that is why we are trying to bring that principle to the Commerzbank. And the other thing is to say, well, you didn't know, but you have really, really valuable data and services that could be used in outside organizations, for example, from our corporate clients. And even though we haven't done that before, it's a good idea, and it will generate new revenue streams. So that is, and there you need most definitely governance, because we have to make sure that the design is really RESTful or goes into direction of RESTful. We have to make sure that there's a transparent monitoring, security. Yeah, I'm talking too long, but I mean, that is really something where I have to say standards really help to overcome the old principles from a big corporate structure, right?
Yeah. I totally agree. And I was just smiling because you said so in the direction of RESTful or something. It's like hedging it a little bit. It's like kind of restfully a little bit.
A little bit more restful, right?
yeah, more restful than before. That's something. So you said, the governance is important because you want those APIs, even though APIs have been around for a very long time. Totally agree, right? But if you want them to play that role that you were saying, you need to have a little bit different focus. And I think that is really something that takes some getting used to. And what I'm wondering, so you already talked about that you have trainings, that you engage organizational units to explain to them what really matters for APIs. Are there other ingredients basically in your governance, in the way how you approach governance?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing currently is we still have 5 delivery cells, so teams that are helping the other business areas to provide their APIs. And we started as well with developing web services to free up the host, for example. So we develop web services that are able to provide APIs or the mainframe data via the web services and API to the clients. And that is something that helped a lot to bring the knowledge to all the other business units. And of course, we have now here a change. So we are changing from delivering APIs for others up to we are bringing governance and self-services. It's all about automation. Now, as more and more business units understand APIs and how to make use of them and how to produce them, they want to get more and more responsibility by themselves. And that is something that we now need to work on. So we need to provide more and more self-services to make them independent from us in order to avoid us being a bottleneck for API provisioning.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that is also something you see in a lot of organizations where at some point when you have enough momentum, then some API programs then become a victim of their own success, right? Because they have manual processes, review boards, and some of these processes are quite involved. And then suddenly when everybody starts rolling out APIs, you're in that role of slowing things down, right? So automation is important. Is there any other thing that you would say is important on your journey, to play this governance role within Commerzbank?
Yeah, I think what's important is to think of the API lifecycle. That is something, I mean, when you have all these versions out there, you start the maintenance for different APIs, and that's a situation worse than before. So we have to have a mechanism to control that at least, and to make which is very uncommon in a corporate. We have to deprecate versions and to tell all the consumers, well, you have to change during the next 6 months. So like the contracts that we know from outside, when you make use of an API, it's quite normal. The same rules we need to implement internally, and then not shut down an API. I mean, that's not a good idea after the 6 months, but flag it to all the responsible senior management, because they have to understand that what we're doing here is quite important to take care of the governance and of modern patterns, right? I mean, in the beginning, we had to do a lot of compromises for APIs. For example, for I don't know, not with security. We don't make any compromises with API security.
I would hope so. Yes.
when you're, for example, transferring documents or so, you have to do some compromises there. How that is working, and then you have to change these patterns, but they only can be changed by using more modern version with the new patterns. And that is something where I think governance is quite important to senior management as well, because when you don't do that, you will have risks of, I don't know, API outages, or not for the platform that's quite resilient, but for several APIs. And in the API economy, we created kind of internal API economy, an internal ecosystem, you can say so, of APIs, where of course the APIs are reused in different processes, and we have to make sure that not one process is causing an incident affecting all the others. So, and that of course is something where I think you need governance as well, to have, like, I don't know, call limiter, circuit breaker, all this modern stuff to make sure that a central infrastructure like the API gateway and all the API services are not affected of one incident or one misusage or whatever from one consumer, right?
Yeah. No, of course. And at some point, right, we had this topic before. The API ecosystem also, there's another version of becoming a victim of your own success. Once you have enough producers and consumers, you start having lots of dependencies, right? That's just natural. And that's kind of what you want to have, because if there's no dependencies, that means nobody uses your APIs. That's not really what you want.
Absolutely.
So in terms of the dependencies, do you have full visibility? I know that's kind of a bad question maybe to ask, but do you have full visibility into those dependencies? Or are there still situations where you might say, for this API, we're actually not 100% sure who's using it?
No, we have 100% visibility. There's everything transparent. That is something which is another advantage as well for all the business units, because they now know their customers. I mean, that sounds a little bit strange that you don't know who's your customer, but when an organization has grown for 150 years, I mean, the people have changed and so on and so forth, and not everything was designed in such a way before. It's always possible to find out who's consuming, but takes more time for the older system. And with API, everything is transparent, right? I'm
not even sure it's always possible, and like in these old systems where like anybody is just reaching into the database and just pulling something out and combining it with something else. I mean, I think there's a lot of examples where really nobody has any idea what.
Yeah, I work for other IT companies, and I can say there, of course, this is the case, but in a bank, I mean, we have to make sure that not someone is making sure of data, right? I mean,
okay, you're right. Somebody can just write a program that like reaches into the customer database. Maybe that's not so great. Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah, I'm sure visibility is definitely one of the important things. And I mean, in terms, maybe it's just maybe in terms of renovating things, maybe that's just one of the advantages of kind of reimagining what you do and doing it in a little bit better way, right? That you also say, okay, now that we're doing this, let's make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. One of the things I'm wondering is, if you look at like just sort of business analysts looking at how do digital transformation initiatives work, and I'm just using that as the umbrella term for all these digital initiatives, the success rate is really low. In many cases, right, these things don't deliver quite what was hoped for. Like the success rate, I think, is like usually they say around 30%. And of course, they don't completely fail, but they don't fully deliver what people were hoping for. So I'm wondering if you could point to like one maybe really big hurdle that you didn't quite foresee maybe, and that then presented itself and you said, that's something we really have to take care of. What do we do now? Is there something you can remember that, where you say, well, that could have gone wrong if we didn't realize that this was something we really had to take care of?
Yeah, I mean, when you're working as an infrastructure cluster, nobody's coming to you and ask you for business, right? So, and that is a problem, because when you want to have a wide API portfolio, or when you want to have an API portfolio for internal purpose or for external purpose, you have to have a strategy for that. Because when you say, well, we are planning a wide portfolio for external open banking, and we offer, I don't know, loans and securities, but no accounts and payments, and you don't have that in mind, and you need payments and accounts for banks, right? Or when you want to make use of APIs in several front ends, you need some cross-functional APIs for authentication, authorization, the regulatory lock or I don't know, fraud processes. And when you are missing one of these packages, whole use cases doesn't work. And that is really something where we sit together in the API cluster and thought of, what can we do in order to solve this problem? And we said, well, maybe we shall define the portfolio. And so we did. And it started as a list of, what we thought would be good. And then sounded that with architects, cluster leads, business experts, and so on and so forth. And the list got better and better. And that brought us in a situation where we provided 150 really, really valuable API that make sense working together last year. And we are still working on this because we see that the single clusters being responsible end-to-end for their products are not having in mind several functionalities that might make sense to be cross-functional, available for everybody. For example, central consent management, or I don't know, or central authentication, including SSO or whatever, and that is something really required and necessary infrastructure for open banking, and going a step towards open banking ecosystems. I mean, API-based ecosystems are the next thing where I think, oh God, governance is really required, because when you're working together with another company, you have to take care of the interfaces, what interfaces are you using. So therefore we are part of the Berlin group, and I have 3 people from my cluster working in the Berlin group to work on common standards for finance APIs. And you have to take care of responsibilities of data. I mean, data protection in an ecosystem that might come with some points I haven't seen yet, or some missing processes for, I don't know, monitoring, support. Who's doing that in an ecosystem where we are working together with other companies? I mean, of course, there's always an orchestrator, and he will take care of it. But what is if we would be the orchestrator of such an ecosystem? We have to take care of it. And I think with in the external context, there are a lot of things ahead that we haven't seen yet, where I would give a different answer to your question when you ask me in a year from now, because
I will do that.
A lot of pleasure.
No, but so what you're saying, I find that really interesting, is that like you moved up from just providing the infrastructure to saying, here's a reasonable portfolio that we probably should be covering, so that the whole package of APIs that we have kind of makes sense. And I think that is a really interesting idea, right? By saying that, I often talk about this as the network effect, saying that like you really start seeing the value of those things, such as APIs and other network things, once you have enough of them that people can start putting things together in really interesting ways, right? And it kind of needs a critical mass, I think. And
yeah, and you
I think that critical mass, right, is really necessary.
And you can enable all the other business units to some point, but I mean, they have to take care of their current business. And as you might know, we are currently in a really difficult transformation. We will do that, but the focus is as well on how to take care of the branches and on all the processes. We are reducing stuff in Germany. So there are a lot of things to do, and we are now working on the future topics and coming up with a new technology in a completely new area. I mean, having banking as a service APIs or providing banking as a service API is pretty new to all banks, not only to us. It's pretty new to all banks, and we are, I think, in a very good position here. But of course, in the API cluster, we have more expertise in sense of what is the market doing and what API functionality could make sense and what do we really need to make those APIs working together, right?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense to me. So you said, you'd say it would be interesting if we talk a year from now to hear
Yes.
what was the last problem that you saw. But looking forward, is there anything new on your horizon, basically, that you've just taken up? Where it's something where you just recently decided, maybe that is something we should start focusing more on. Is there just something just ahead of you that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, during the last year, I think it was second half of the year, we changed the focus from internal APIs to external APIs. And there, of course, are a lot of upcoming questions to legal, data protection, compliance, who can we partner with, who should we partner with, and to find the right partners in open banking is, I think, the key, right? When you want to build up ecosystems or so, and that is something, yeah, I haven't solved yet all the problems here, right?
Yeah, well, that would be pretty surprising if you said, "Well, we've solved that. That's done." But I think there is, like, if you start changing the focus from internal to external APIs, there's definitely quite a new set of questions that you have to look at. It's really fascinating to see this transformation at work and to hear a little bit of your experience. Christoph, thanks so much for joining. This was really fascinating information. Fascinating conversation. I will definitely take up your offer, so to speak, and ask you again a year from now what has happened.
Yeah, it would be a pleasure, as I said.
Okay. Until then, thanks again. And I hope everybody who's listening in enjoyed it. And see you soon on this channel. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.